Here we are with the week 6 test. So remember, the advantage of looking at this test, there are a couple of advantages. Advantage one is you're just going to learn more stuff. You're going to be able to understand the math better. The immediate advantage is that you're going to understand the stuff better when you take the next test, because this concept 6.1 that we're about to go over, that's going to be on the next test. Right below it, you can see concept 5.1. That's going to be on the next test. So let's go ahead and jump into the Coles here and their real estate buying. So they interviewed 2 agents. They're selling their house, interviewed 2 agents. Now remember, whenever you're selling a house, you want the agent who's going to charge you the least amount of money. The less money you pay the agent, the more money you get to save for yourself. So here's what they found from the 2 agents. The first agent they talked to, this agent I'm doing in green right here, has 2 fees. They have a flat fee, and remember we talked about that flat fee as a one-time fee. Doesn't matter how much you sell the house for, the flat fee is the same. So they have a flat fee of $5,000 and then a 2% commission. So that 2% commission, 2%, which is 0.02, and that is on the price of the house. So whatever they sell the house for, the agent would get 2% of that for managing the transaction, for finding them a buyer, for doing the paperwork. They would get 2%. The second agent they looked at right here has no flat fee, so they don't charge anything as a flat fee, and they charge no flat fee, and they charge a 4% commission. So they are charging 4%, which equals 0.04 when we get around to doing the multiplying. And again, that's going to be on the price of the house. We don't need to write that again. All right, so let's take a look at what we can expect from those 2 agents. So for the first agent, when we calculate the total cost, because that's what we care about, or that's what the Coles care about, is how much do they pay all together. So for the first agent, which we are creatively going to call Agent 1, they have a flat fee of $5,000, and they have a commission of 2%. And that 2% commission, let's grab our calculator. That 2% commission is based on this $175,000 cost of the house. So that's 2% times $175,000, and that equals $3,500. So when we want to know what Agent 1 is going to cost altogether, it's going to cost $5,000 plus $3,500, or a total of $8,500. That's the cost to buy from the first agent. All right, now let's go to the second agent. So the second agent, Agent 2, their flat fee is $0. They don't charge anything as a flat fee. They do charge commission. That is 4% times the $175,000, and $175,000. Oh, that would be 100. It'd be 1.5 million. You always want to make sure you get the right numbers into the calculator. 175,000 times 4%, that is $7,000. So in this case, with these types of commissions and this amount of money for the house, remember you have to look at what is the house itself costing. With that situation, we know that the Coles should sell through agent 2. And they will actually save, selling through agent 2 in this case, they will save $1,500 in commissions. They'll make an extra $1,500 for themselves. All right, so review that as much as you need to review it. The advantage of doing this with the videos is you can go back, you can look at it, you can see, did I not understand something? Let me listen to it again. All right, let's move on. Question number 2. Find 75% of 48. So anytime we're doing percent of a number, percent of, that's always multiplication. So what they're asking us to do in this problem is do 0.75 times 48. And in this case, that will give us 36. That's not one of my best looking 8s. Yeah, I'm only making it worse, aren't I? So that will give us 36. Let me fix that. That's a better 8. All right, question number 3. Ryan has 12 games at Mitchell Park, 8 games at Evans Field, and 4 games at Bain Stadium. What percentage of Ryan's games are at Evans Field? So there is the question we have to think about. What percentage of the games are at Evans Field? That's the crucial piece of information right there, Evans Field. So when we look at this, we know that to get a percentage of anything, percentage is always the item you're looking at. In this case, the item we're looking at is Evans Field. Divided by the total of all the items. So divided by the total, the total of the games played. So Evans Field is right here, 8 games at Evans Field. So there are 8 games at Evans Field. Altogether, they played 12 games at Mitchell Park, 8 games at Evans Field, 4 games at Baines Stadium. That's 24 games total. And so there's our setup. Our setup is the number of games at Evans Field divided by the total. That gives us 0.3 repeating. And since the question is what percentage, if you left it like that, you didn't get full credit because you didn't answer the question, was which percentage. The percentage that goes with that is 33.33%, or you could show it as 33.3 line over it percent. Either one of those would be an acceptable answer. All right, so once again, decide, do I need to look back on this? Is there something I need to rewind? You do it whatever you need. And if I'm discussing a problem you don't need, you got it fully correct, then you run to the next one. Go to the one that you need. All right, let's move on. Direct variation identifying a constant of variation. Remember, constants of variation are things that change consistently, a change you can predict based on a change in something else. So in this particular problem, they tell us that the distance the string stretches varies directly with the weight applied. And that should make good sense to you. You hang a weight from the bottom of a spring. The heavier the weight, the further the spring is going to stretch. For us, it means identifying what that constant is. Well, in this case, if we look at the constant change in the table for the weight, we see it changes by 2. We talked about that delta, that triangle being the Greek letter delta, which mathematicians use to show change. Now we look at what's the change in how far the spring stretches, how many inches. And we can see that that constant change is a change of 7. So we would say that the constant of variation is that the spring stretches, its change stretches directly based on a 7-inch stretch for every 2 additional pounds of weight. So constant of variation itself is defined by how much y changes divided by how much x changes. So we have to define the x and the y. Well, here's what we know. We know that in this case, the weight applied is the x. It is the independent. It controls. And the stretch is the y. It is dependent. It depends on how much weight we put on. So the independent is the thing that controls, and the dependent is the thing that gets controlled. So let's look at the definition then, which is constant of variation is the change in y, how much the independent changes, divided by the change in x. In this particular problem, we said the change in the y, the distance stretched, was 7. And the change in the x, how much it stretched, the weight applied, was 2. That can be simplified, and you got full credit if you had 7 over 2, but that can be simplified to 3.5. So 3.5 is our constant of variation. Part B asks us to take that constant of variation and write an equation. What's the equation to tell how far you stretch the spring based on the weight? And our equation would be the distance that the spring stretches, so D is going to be distance stretched the distance the spring stretches equals 3.5 times W, where W is the weight. And when we went over the test, I asked you to write it this way also, so you could be reminded, it's always the y is equal to something happening to the x. So as soon as you identify the x and the y, you know that it's going to be something happening to y based on something happening to x. So either one of those would have been an acceptable answer. All right, so check your work here before you move through the video. If you need to pause it and look back over any of this, go ahead and do that. Final problem, final main problem. So now we're doing direct variation from a graph. How can you use a graph or use information that's given to you in a story to go ahead and solve some other information? So here they're telling us the total weight that a truck carries. We've seen this. So weight a truck is carrying varies directly with the number of crates. And we can see they've put this into a table, and we know from a lot of our previous work, this axis is always the x, this axis is always the y. So varies directly. That tells us we have a proportional relationship. That tells us that this is proportional. And we need to know that because that tells us that we're going to have a point at the origin, which makes perfect sense. The weight the truck is carrying, it doesn't say the weight of the truck, but the weight the truck is carrying varies based on how many crates you put in the truck. That certainly makes good sense. And they give us one other point. Anytime we're going to graph a line, we need 2 points. Here's our other point. 5 crates give us a weight of 600 pounds. So 5 crates give us a weight of 600 pounds. So 5 at 600. Now that we have the 2 of those, we can go ahead and place a line. We can go ahead and put a line all the way. Oh, I grabbed my line tool. Oh, having some issues here. I grabbed my line tool, but I did not get it started. So let's try that again. Oh, it's a much better line. There we go. That line represents the relationship between the number of crates and the amount the truck is carrying. So now we're ready to answer our questions. A we just did. So A is taken care of. That's our graph. B, what's the slope of the line? So we have defined slope, and actually we didn't define it. We've read the definition for slope. Slope definition was invented long before any of us were born. We know that slope is defined as the change in y. So let me actually write it both ways. The change in y over the change in x. And we calculate the change in y by taking the value of y2 minus the value of y1, and we calculate the change in x as x2 minus x1. So we need an x2 and an x1. Well, we have both of those. We know that because this is proportional, it goes through the origin. So there's 1 point. And we were told that when you put 5 crates on the truck, it's carrying 600 pounds. Now, which you choose for which is totally up to you. You can make this first, the 0, 0, the 1s, or the 2s. You can make the 5, 600, the 1s or the 2s. As I've said in class, I always take the smaller one and make it the 1s, and the larger one and make it the 2s. so that when I get to the subtraction, I'm not subtracting and ending up with negative numbers. So y2, 600, oh, I wrote a 1 there. That should have been a 2. Sorry about that. y2, 600, minus y1, which was 0, over x2, 5, minus x2, which is 0, gives us 600 over 5. And I'm going to bring that right up here. 600 over 5 is equal to 120, and that is the slope. The slope of this line is 120. That's great. That's a mathematical thing. Slope is 120. But what does that mean? Well, that's what part C asks. What's the significance? What does it mean? Well, what it means is pretty straightforward. Each crate weighs 120 pounds. Each crate is 120 pounds. Okay. 120 pounds. Notice, same as our slope. That slope can be called a unit rate. That slope is the amount of 1. And in fact, if we look at our table, here is 1. Here is 1 crate and 120. Just like this was 5 crates and 600. And this origin was no crates and no weight being carried. Last question. If the truck's carrying 11 crates, how much weight? Well, we would take the 11 crates times the weight of each crate, and we would say the truck is carrying 1,320 pounds. All right. Question at the bottom. Correct answer was 176.25, and that would be calculated by doing the 2,350, that's the amount they put in, times the interest rate of 2.5% times the 3 years. This 158, this answer, which is a wrong answer, that's what you get when you multiply the 2,350 times the 2.5%. That's 1 year's interest. You have to multiply it one more time by that 3 to get the 3 years interest. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is your week 6 test. Take some time to go over that, study it before it's time for the week 7 test. You'll see several of these things appear on the week 7 test.